13. Catherine's mother had always been critical of her daughter. She couldn't accept that Catherine wasn't the traditional Catholic farm girl like the other girls in the village. She wasn't quiet and submissive like them, nor eager to please her parents. She was resourceful and cunning, wise beyond her years and able to get away with misdeeds. Money was always tight in their household, a fact her parents had pointed out to her ever since she was a young child, but that never stopped her from getting what she wanted. It had started with pocketing some of Mrs. Wilson's soda bread from the corner market stall whenever she passed after the service on Sundays. Her nimble actions meant she was long gone before Mrs. Wilson had even noticed any of her stock was missing. The glee Catherine felt when she took a bite into that thick crust was indescribable. Why should she ever go without, when everything around her was for the taking? She could have anything she wanted. All she had to do was watch for opportunities as they presented themselves. Of course, Catherine always tried to play the part of the virtuous daughter, but her mother never fell for her deception. The collection of crumbs she often found in Catherine's coat pocket probably didn't help, but exposing Catherine's lies was only part of their difficult relationship. It was as if she could see through Catherine's mask of duplicity to what was really hidden in the depths of Catherine's soul. As the extent of Catherine's lies grew over the years, so did her mother's fear of her. No punishment or restriction, no teaching of the difference between right and wrong, either morally or legally, made any difference. Looking back, Catherine could almost pinpoint the moment that her mother realized she would never be able to control her. The event that caused Catherine's mother to understand her daughter's true nature was the mysterious disappearance of the village doctor's 8-year-old daughter, Michelle. As the only child of the esteemed doctor, she was spoiled by the villagers, so no one thought it odd that Catherine would befriend her even though she was a few years older. Catherine thought she was the only one who saw Michelle for what she truly was, a spoiled, entitled crybaby, always carrying around a tattered little doll that her mother had knitted for her when she was a baby. She'd been born to a life of ease. Her blonde, curly locks and bulbous face that was always red from crying made Catherine particularly vexed. What reason could she have for crying all the time? She didn't know the hardships of the real world. Not yet. Catherine was the last person to ever see Michelle alive. When the worried doctor knocked on the door of their home late that night, eager to locate his child, Catherine rattled off a well-rehearsed tale of how they'd been playing by the creek behind the church for most of the day. When it was time for Catherine to go home, Michelle had refused to leave, despite Catherine's desperate pleas that she would get into trouble if she wasn't home before dark. But she didn't tell him what really happened to the half-witted Michelle. They never did find her body, only the tattered little doll she carried around. The execution of her plan had been almost perfect. She hadn't anticipated her mother would arrive home early that evening. If she had only arrived 10 minutes later, she would never have caught her hiding her blood-stained clothes by a pile of rocks near the well. Thankfully, her mother believed that blood was thicker than water, so she never told the police or the doctor what she saw. After that, Catherine sensed her mother deliberately avoided her and began placing holy medals in every room of the house as a form of protection. But she still kept a watchful eye on her daughter. Then, in the spring, an incident occurred with a local village boy named Seamus Murphy. Seamus was always fawning over Catherine, following her around and looking for her approval like a lost puppy. He tagged along with her and her friends as if he had belonged with them. He seemed to think he was entitled to join them because the rest of the village decided he and Catherine were a perfect match, and that there was an understanding between the two families. Her family had been friends with his family for years, and his family had significant plots of land. Their union would protect the land for years to come, while also ensuring comfort for her own family for generations. Seamus's parents saw Catherine as a sort of carer for their dim-witted son, believing she would set him right and give him enough children to take care of the farms. Catherine thought Seamus was the definition of slow, and everything he did irritated her. He was rude and constantly spoke at her while refusing to listen to anything she had to say. He had lank, greasy hair and always smelt like the farm he worked on, a mixture of cow manure and mud. He went around wearing trousers that were always a bit too short for his legs, but he never seemed to notice despite the cool air freezing his exposed skin. And even though she'd never shown any interest in him, he would always call her his missus. How could she even consider him a match for her? But there would never be a marriage if Seamus was no longer alive. The only good thing about his devotion was that he blindly did everything she wanted, which she used to her advantage. She recalled one time when a neighbor's cat had a litter of kittens. They were lovely little things, all black and white and pottering around as they learnt to walk. Catherine, by her own admission, was a little jealous. She had always wanted a cat of her own, but her father had never allowed it. The old woman who owned the mother cat now had a whole litter for herself. It wasn't fair. Why should she have to go without? The kitten's arrival provided her with the basis of an ingenious plan, a plan that would not only rid her of Seamus, but one that would also give the old woman what she deserved, because she had the one thing Catherine wanted. One evening, Catherine said to Seamus, "If we're ever to be together, Seamus, I need to know that you'll do anything for me, that you'll provide for me. I really need those kittens. If you can't get them for me, then I don't think I'll ever be able to marry you." "Will you really be my wife if I get you those kittens? Do you promise?" Seamus asked, the hopeful tone of his voice making Catherine nauseous. "You can't break a promise, you know," he said, pointing his finger at her. "So if you promise me, you can't back out." You really are an idiot, she thought. His eyes had lit up when she promised him. She even faked being excited about their future together. He hung on her every word. It was the only time she recalled him ever truly listening to her. It was all too easy to plant the devious seed in his head. She told him to wait until everyone had gone to bed and that he couldn't tell a soul about their plan. People wouldn't understand. He promised he would return that night with the kittens so they could be together. Catherine had to stop herself from rolling her eyes in front of him. He was so pathetic. Catherine slipped out that night to witness her plan in action. She knew Seamus would get caught quickly because he was too clumsy to remain undetected for long. What Catherine hadn't told Seamus was that the old woman's husband had failing eyesight and always slept with a shotgun by his bedside in case he was burgled. She'd learned this information when she'd eavesdropped on her parents, who were good friends of their neighbors. Perched on a nearby fence with her cloak wrapped tightly around her, Catherine swung her legs back and forth as she waited for the sound to go off. She could have only been there for 15 minutes when she heard frantic shouting followed by two echoing booms. She clasped her hands together, closed her eyes, and threw her head back to the sky, relishing in her triumph. Her eyes shot open when the third gunshot went off. She hadn't been expecting a third shot. Seamus must have really scared them when he broke into their house. Catherine chuckled at the thought. It wasn't long before the villagers came running out of their homes to see what the deafening noise had been. She heard the old woman screaming, so Catherine took that as her cue to head back home. She whistled as she skipped through an overgrown field. Her plan had worked. She'd gotten rid of Seamus and tainted the neighbor's cottage with the image of his dead body. She ran into the kitchen laughing and congratulating herself to find her mother sitting at the table, under the dim glow of a small candle. Her shoulders were slumped and her eyes were wide and glassy. She didn't have to ask her what had happened. The distant screaming and the jovial look on Catherine's face gave everything away. Her mother only spoke one sentence to her before she leaped to her feet and backed out of the room. She didn't ask for any explanation, but said in a low voice, "You, my girl, have the devil within you." It was a statement that had stayed with Catherine over the years. Shortly after, the threats of being sent to the Convent of Mercy began. Catherine didn't care. She had managed to get what she wanted, to be rid of Seamus. She'd never made it a secret that she didn't want to marry Seamus, but nobody listened to her or told him to back off. What she wanted didn't matter to them. Seamus was an idiot, and she didn't see anything wrong with ridding herself of an imbecile who wouldn't leave her alone. She didn't shed a tear at Seamus's funeral, nor did she defend him when people called him a vandal for breaking into the house. She was proud of herself for having sorted out her problem on her own, but unfortunately, she never did get that kitten. And that was the real tragedy in her eyes. Back in the present, Catherine shut her eyes and shook her head, desperate to get away from the memories of her haunting old life. Her mother was long dead, so she knew that her mind must have been playing tricks on her. She couldn't be here looking at her. When she reopened them, Sister Nora's black eyes stared right back, piercing through her. "You talk too much, Catherine. You are too loose with your words, and your inability to fall in line is growing problematic for me. I would have thought our last discussion would have penetrated that thick skull of yours with the importance of staying out of my business," she said, jabbing her finger at Catherine's temple. "But perhaps we need to try a harsher approach to make the message sink in. Open your mouth." Catherine vehemently shook her head. Every instinct in her body was telling her to keep her mouth clamped shut. "Open your mouth, or I will open it for you," Sister Nora barked. She dropped her arms from the chair, and Catherine saw her opportunity. She leaped up and tried to run to the door, but Sister Nora managed to intercept her and drag her back to the chair with an inhuman strength. Then she lunged at Catherine, pulling her hair back and ripping out some chunks in the process. She forced her head back so that it was facing upwards and used the forceps to make her mouth remain open. If Catherine tried to close her mouth, she would only taste rusted metal and probably destroy her teeth. Sister Nora remained still for a few moments, then began tapping the forceps across each tooth while staring menacingly at her. "Which tooth should I go for first?" she said, her eyes gleaming as she taunted the young girl. Catherine's eyes were wide with fear, and she could barely see Sister Nora through her tears. Her pupils kept darting back and forth between Sister Nora's face and the forceps, trying to gauge when she would pounce, hoping to brace for the impact. She could see how the nun was enjoying the extent of the power she had over her, knowing there was nothing Catherine could do to stop what was coming. "You are stuck here, Catherine," she said, breathing harshly into her face. "And I will not tolerate anyone meddling in my affairs. You think you are all holier than thou, going behind my back to Father Michael, and to find out what exactly. Answers to questions which you already knew. You knew what happened to those girls. Come on now, Catherine. Aren't you meant to be smart? Did you really believe that the body you saw on your first day was due to natural causes? Sister Nora scoffed and rolled her eyes. What exactly were you planning to do once you'd got those answers? Did you think you could find Solison's father, Michael? That he was going to save you? That little idiot will be no help to you. He does as I say, just like everyone else within these walls. Blood will continue to be shed within this place for as long as I wish. It is my kingdom to do with as I please, and all of you are disposable beings, like trash. Unexpectedly, Sister Nora loosened her tight grip on Catherine's hair. She retreated slowly, like a snake slithering back into its hole, and stood in front of the gasping orphan, twisting the forceps around in her hand. Catherine couldn't believe it. Had Sister Nora decided to let her go after all? Was this all just to teach her a lesson? She tried to pull herself together as best she could. She straightened herself up and swiped her tears away. Then she remembered her previous vow to never show fear in Sister Nora's presence. She glared at her through narrowed eyes and sniffed, then used the back of her hand to wipe her nose. She was angry with herself for having succumbed to her fear. In an instant, she had undone her promise to herself. She would have kicked herself if she could. As if sensing Catherine's anger and frustration, Sister Nora smirked. Her free hand reached up to brush against the crucifix, and she shook her head, her face contorted in a twisted grin as a maniacal chuckle emerged. She lunged towards Catherine, who was flung backwards off her chair. Her back slammed into the wooden floor, and the chair clattered to the side. Winded, Catherine didn't have time to register what was happening as Sister Nora straddled her and perched on her chest. Catherine didn't have enough strength left to push the nun off her body. Her weak arms could only hit at the nun's legs, a futile attempt as Sister Nora didn't even register the impact. And the nun's weight made it difficult for her to breathe, so she couldn't even let out a desperate cry for help. Suddenly, she could breathe momentarily as Sister Nora leaned forward, thrust the forceps into Catherine's mouth, and pulled out one of her back molars, slicing through her tongue in the process. Blood gushed forth, and the pain made her head spin. Sister Nora sat back on her chest, restricting her breath once more. She held up the stolen molar to the light and smiled. Catherine could make out part of her gum still attached to the end of the tooth. She began to cough, the thick red blood spluttering from her mouth, but Sister Nora just leaned over her and smiled. The last thing Catherine saw before she passed out was the glint of the crucifix as it fell from Sister Nora's neck and dangled over her face.